The first warning was not a letter. It was my roof covered in red tags. And the weird part was, the people threatening me did not even have authority over my property. I came home on a Thursday afternoon, still smelling like motor oil and gas station coffee, and found $24,000 worth of solar panels marked up like a crime scene. Bright red violation stickers were slapped across the glass in neat little rows, like somebody had climbed up there with a ladder, a clipboard, and a personal grudge against sunshine. I sat in my pickup for a minute with the engine still running, just staring at it. The radio was playing some old country song, the kind where a man loses his dog, his truck, and his will to live before the second chorus, but I could not hear a word of it. All I could think was, there is no way this is real. We had spent almost 4 months getting everything approved: county permit, electrical plan, structural review, licensed installers, final inspection. The whole beautiful mess of paperwork that makes you question whether modern civilization is worth saving. I had done it right because my wife, Amma, is the kind of woman who keeps receipts in labeled folders, and I am the kind of man who knows better than to argue with a woman who owns a label maker. So when I stepped out of the truck and saw those notices saying unauthorized installation, daily penalties, corrective action required, I honestly laughed once. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your brain sees something so stupid it has to test the sound before it lets anger take over. Then I found the envelope taped to the porch railing. The letterhead said Westridge Manor Homeowners Council. That was when the laugh disappeared. See? The Bisson? I did not live in Westridge Manor. My place was an old brick farmhouse on 6 acres just outside the development line. My grandfather bought the land back when the road was still gravel, and the biggest neighborhood dispute around there was whose cow had wandered through whose bean field. Westridge Manor had been built maybe 7 years earlier, all matching mailboxes and curved sidewalks and houses painted in different shades of oatmeal. My house was older than half the trees in their entrance landscaping, but somehow this little private council had decided my roof was their business. I walked inside holding the letter like it might bite me. Hannah was at the kitchen table sorting school forms for our daughter, and she looked up at my face before she looked at the paper. "What happened?" she asked. I handed it to her. She read the first page, flipped to the second, then went back to the first like the answer might have hidden between the paragraphs. "They cannot do this, right?" she said. "I mean, they actually cannot do this." I wanted to say, of course not. "Honey, these people are just bored adults with too much stationery." But the truth was, I did not know yet, and not knowing made me furious in a way I did not expect. There is a certain kind of anger that burns hot and dumb, the kind that makes you want to call somebody and start yelling before you understand the situation. This was different. This was colder. This was the kind of anger that makes you clear the kitchen table, open a laptop, and start making folders. The next morning I called the number on the notice, and, after being transferred 3 times by people who all sounded like they were guarding the entrance to a very small kingdom, I finally reached the council president, a man named Nolan Pierce. I had heard of Nolan before. Everybody around that side of the county had. He was one of those men who wore golf shirts like uniforms and spoke in that smooth, patient voice people use when they're explaining something obvious to a child. "Mr. Au Walker," he said, stretching my name like he had already filed me under nuisance. "I understand you are calling about the architectural enforcement action." I looked out the kitchen window at my roof. "You mean the stickers your people put on my solar panels?" There was a pause, just long enough to tell me he did not appreciate the wording. "They are non-compliant reflective roof structures," he said. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. Non-compliant reflective roof structures. That man had taken the sun, electricity, and common sense and somehow turned them into a zoning disease. "Nolan," I said, trying very hard to sound like the kind of adult my mother raised, "my property is not in your HOA. He gave a little chuckle, not a real laugh, more like a tiny performance of superiority. That is a common misconception among neighboring parcel owners. Recent county guidance allows adjacent community boards to review exterior modifications that affect shared visual character. Shared visual character. I looked at my muddy boots, the tractor out by the shed, and the old barn with one door that never closed right, and I thought, buddy, if I'm part of your visual character, your brochure has been lying to people. But I kept my voice steady. "Send me the guidance. We would be happy to provide documentation through the proper channel," he said. "Great. Email it." Another pause. Our council will review the request. That was the first moment I knew something was off. Not because he sounded unsure, because he sounded too sure. People who are right can usually explain why. People who are bluffing throw words like council and procedure into the air and hope you get tired before they land 2 days later. Instead of documentation, I got another notice, then another one the following week, this time threatening a fine for every day the panels remained visible from the Westridge entrance road. Hannah found that one before I did, and when I came in from mowing, she was standing in the kitchen with the letter in one hand, and that look on her face married men learned to respect. "Ethan," she said, "I'm about to become a problem." I loved her so much in that moment I almost forgot I was mad. Almost. That night we sat at the table after our daughter went to bed, and I started digging through county records. I read energy ordinances, planning commission notes, inspection reports, meeting minutes, anything I could find. It was boring enough to make a grown man consider joining a monastery just for the silence, but somewhere after midnight, with bad coffee in my mug and Hannah asleep on the couch beside a stack of printed pages, I found it. The county had updated its renewable energy policy. Yes, but it said the opposite of what Nolan claimed. Private associations could not create unreasonable barriers to approved residential solar systems, and nothing in the language gave neighboring councils authority over properties outside their boundaries. I read it twice, then a third time, because victory feels better when you make sure it is not a typo. Nolan had not misunderstood the rule. He had counted on me never reading it, and that should have been enough. I could have hired a lawyer, sent one letter, made them peel the stickers off, and gone back to my life. Honestly, that would have been the healthy choice, but while searching the county database, I noticed something else. Westridge Manor had been built by Bellhaven Development Group, a company with a reputation people described carefully, the way folks describe a dog that has bitten before but not recently. Fast builds, tight budgets, lots of subcontractors, lots of inspections signed off in a hurry during the housing rush. I remembered little comments from over the years. An electrician at the hardware store shaking his head, a county clerk saying Westridge files were always a mess, a plumber once joking that those houses went up so fast the concrete probably did not know it was dry yet. None of it was proof. It was just smoke. But after Nolan tried to invent authority over my roof, I started wondering what else people in Westridge had been too confident about. A week later, I met my friend Marcus Bell at a roadside diner off Route 16. Marcus was an electrical compliance consultant, which is a fancy way of saying he got called when normal inspectors found something that made them stop chewing their gum. We were halfway through burgers when I mentioned Westridge. He stopped with a fry in his hand. "Why are you asking about Westridge?" he said. "Just curious." He laughed. "Nobody is just curious about Westridge unless a lawyer, a contractor, or a very angry homeowner is nearby." So I told him everything. The stickers, the letters, Nolan, the fake interpretation of the county rule. Marcus listened without interrupting, which for him was basically a medical event. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "That man picked the wrong farmhouse." I smiled, but he did not. His face had changed. "What?" I asked. He wiped his hands on a napkin and looked toward the window. "During that building boom, some subdivisions got pushed through inspection faster than they should have." "Meaning what?" I asked. He shrugged. "Meaning if somebody had a reason to look closely, they might find things that should have been caught a long time ago." I sat there with the noise of the diner around us, plates clattering, coffee pouring, somebody laughing too loud in the corner, and suddenly the fight over my solar panels felt smaller than it had the day before. "And if someone reported a concern?" I asked. Marcus looked back at me, and there was no humor in his eyes now. "Then the county starts asking questions." I drove home that evening with the windows down and the radio off, watching the sun drop behind the fields, the same sun Nolan Pierce apparently considered a threat to community character. For the first time since this mess started, I was not just angry anymore. I was curious, and that, I would learn, was the part Westridge Manor should have been afraid of. I did not file a complaint that night, not officially, not in some dramatic late-hour burst of righteousness. Because real life does not usually give you thunder in the background when you make a decision. It gives you a kitchen table covered in papers, a tired wife rubbing her eyes, and a dog snoring under your chair like he has already heard enough about county regulations. I sat there for a long time with Marcus's words turning over in my head. If somebody had a reason to look closely, they might find things. And I kept telling myself this was about my roof, my property, my rights, But the more I said it, the less true it felt. By morning, I had put together a calm, boring, painfully organized email to the county building department, which is exactly the kind of email that scares people more than angry ones. I attached the solar permit, the Westridge notices, the county policy, photographs of the stickers, and the very simple question, does Westridge Manor Homeowners Council have enforcement authority over my parcel? I also added one line near the bottom, almost as an afterthought, saying that during my review of county files I noticed several unresolved documentation gaps related to Westridge Manor's original electrical approvals, and I would appreciate clarification on whether those records had been independently verified. I read that sentence maybe 10 times before sending it. Hannah leaned over my shoulder and said, "That sounds polite enough to ruin someone's week." I clicked send. 48 hours later, the first county truck rolled into Westridge Manor. I saw it from my back pasture while I was pretending to fix a fence post that did not need fixing. One white truck, 2 inspectors, no sirens, no big production. Just 2 men in county shirts carrying clipboards and wearing the calm expression of people who know everybody lies to them eventually. I remember feeling almost disappointed, like that was it. 1 truck, 1 quiet visit, maybe a few questions, maybe a phone call. Then everyone goes home and Nolan goes back to measuring mailbox emotions or whatever he did with his mornings. But by lunch, there were 3 trucks. By the next day, there were 5. On Friday morning, I counted 7 vehicles near the Westridge entrance, including one from the fire marshal's office, and that was when my stomach dropped in a way I did not expect. It is one thing to want someone held accountable. It is another thing to realize accountability has a parking lot. The first rumors started before the county even released anything. Small towns do not need official statements. They have hair salons, feed stores, church foyers, and one retired guy named Dale who somehow knows everything before it happens and tells it wrong with confidence. By Saturday, people were saying inspectors found mislabeled panels. By Monday, it was bad grounding. By Tuesday, somebody at the gas station swore an entire row of homes had undersized electrical service, though he also once told me he had seen a mountain lion behind the Wendy's. So I took that with a cautious heart. Still, something was happening. Then Marcus called me. He did not say hello. He just said, "You watching this?" I looked out toward the subdivision. Hard not to. He was quiet for a second. They found enough to expand the review. I leaned against the porch post. Enough meaning what? Enough meaning this is not about your panels anymore. I had wanted that. I think, or at least part of me had. The part that still heard Nolan's little chuckle every time I closed my eyes. But I also thought about all those families inside Westridge, people who had bought pretty houses with pretty lawns and 30-year mortgages, people who probably did not know a service panel from a cereal box. They had trusted the builder, the inspectors, the council, the whole invisible chain of people who are supposed to make sure a house is more than painted granite countertops. Now their driveways were full of trucks. Their landscaping was being cut open, and their weekends were turning into meetings with men who used words like deficiency and remediation. Hannah saw it on my face that evening while we were eating spaghetti at the counter because the dining table was still buried in documents. "You feel guilty," she said. "I feel complicated." That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have. She twirled pasta around her fork and looked toward the window, where the last light was fading over the field. "You did not wire those houses, wrong, Ethan?" "No, but I might be the reason everybody found out." She put the fork down. Maybe they needed to find out. That was Hannah. Simple when I wanted to be tangled. And she was right, of course. But right does not always feel clean. 2 weeks into the inspections, I saw Nolan Pierce in person for the first time since the stickers. It was outside Miller's Hardware, the kind of place where half the county buys screws and the other half buys gossip. Nolan came out wearing his usual uniform, crisp polo, clean khakis, sunglasses that cost more than my first lawnmower. But the man inside the outfit had changed. His shoulders were tight, his face looked gray around the edges, and he was moving like somebody had been sleeping in 90-minute installments. He stopped when he saw me. I stopped too. For a second, neither one of us said anything. Then he gave me a smile so thin it should have required a building permit. "Mr. Walker," he said. "Nolan." His jaw flexed. "I hope you understand the disruption your complaint has caused." There it was. Not sorry for trespassing on my property. Not sorry for threatening illegal fines. Not even sorry for turning my roof into a sticker album. Just disruption. I laughed once, quieter this time. Funny. I was going to say the same thing about your ladder. His smile disappeared. You could have handled this through appropriate channels. I asked you for the rule, I said. You sent me threats. He leaned closer. Just a little. Enough for the performance to become personal. You have no idea what you have started. I looked past him at the reflection in the store window. 2 grown men standing between bags of mulch and propane tanks, arguing over the boundaries of power. Maybe not, I said, but I know who started it. For once, Nolan had no polished answer. He just turned and walked away. And I would be lying if I said that did not feel good. Not noble, maybe, but good. The county held its first public information meeting the following Thursday at the high school auditorium because the regular meeting room could not hold the crowd. Hannah and I went even though we did not live in Westridge, partly because curiosity is a powerful drug, and partly because my name had started floating around in the neighborhood like a weather warning. The parking lot was packed. People stood in little clusters beside minivans and pickup trucks, talking in low voices, holding folders, inspection letters, estimates, photographs of open breaker boxes. Inside, the room felt hot and restless. Kids sat on parents' laps. Older couples whispered. A few men in work boots stood along the back wall with arms crossed, looking like they were waiting for someone to admit something expensive. Nolan sat near the front beside 2 other council members and a woman I recognized as their attorney. He did not turn around. When the county engineer stepped up to the microphone, the room went quiet in that instant. Heavy way, a room goes quiet before bad news learns to speak. It was not dramatic. That made it worse. He talked in plain sentences. Preliminary findings, inconsistent grounding methods, missing inspection documentation, improper breaker configurations, utility connection, irregularities, several panels that did not match the approved plans. Every phrase landed like a small stone dropped into deep water. Then came the cost ranges. At first, people just shifted in their seats. Then someone gasped. Then a woman in the 3rd row said, "That cannot be right," loud enough for everyone to hear. The engineer paused, adjusted his glasses, and said the numbers were early estimates and could change after full assessment, which, in government language, means please sit down because this may get worse. A man stood up near the aisle. He looked about my age, maybe younger, wearing a baseball cap and the hollow expression of a person doing math against his will. How did these houses pass inspection in the first place? He asked. The engineer looked toward the county administrator. The county administrator looked at his notes. Nobody looked comfortable. That is part of the ongoing review, he said. Another woman stood. Did the developer know? Again, no clean answer. Then somebody from the back called out. What about the council? You people fine us for trash cans being visible. But nobody noticed the electrical systems were wrong? That was when every head turned toward No. I watched him from across the room, and I will never forget his face. It was not anger exactly. It was the face of a man realizing the room he used to control had found another door. For years, Nolan had built his little empire on order, curb appeal, rules, appearances. He had made people repaint shutters, move garden beds, remove basketball hoops, replace fences, all in the name of protecting the community. And now the community was asking why the things under the walls, behind the panels, below the lawns, had been ignored while he was busy policing porch lights. One older resident stood up slowly, holding a shaking piece of paper. "My husband has oxygen equipment," she said. "Are you telling me our power system may not be safe?" Nobody answered fast enough. That silence did more damage than any speech could have. After the meeting, people spilled into the parking lot in angry little circles. Some blamed the developer, some blamed the county, some blamed the council. A few looked at me like I'd personally crawled under their houses with wire cutters. I understood that too. When people are scared, they search for the nearest face to hang the fear on, and mine was available. A woman approached me near my truck, eyes red, jaw tight. "Are you the solar guy?" she asked. "I guess I am. My yard is dug up because of this." I nodded. "I'm sorry." She waited for more. Maybe an excuse, maybe a fight. I did not give her one. "I really am," I said. "But if something was wrong, you deserve to know." Her face changed then, just a little. Not forgiveness, not agreement, but something softer than blame. She looked back at the auditorium. "I just went to the safe house," she said. That sentence stayed with me all the way home, because underneath all the politics and power games and Nolan's polished arrogance, that was what most people wanted. A safe house, a fair rule, a straight answer. Nothing fancy, just the basic dignity of not being lied to by people who use official letterhead. A month later, Westridge Manor looked like somebody had shaken it upside down. Trenches ran through perfect lawns. Contractor vans lined the curbs. Orange cones stood where flower beds used to be. Temporary generators hummed in driveways. The neighborhood that had once treated my solar panels like an aesthetic emergency now looked like a construction documentary sponsored by regret. I was on my porch one evening, watching 2 utility trucks work me the entrance road, when my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number, but something in me knew before I answered. "This is Ethan." There was a pause. Then Nolan's voice came through, smaller than I remembered. "Mr. Walker, we need to talk." I looked across the field at the blinking lights, at the torn-up lawns, at the whole beautiful mess of consequences blowing in the sunset. "About my panels," I said, "or about what happened when somebody finally read the paperwork." He exhaled slowly. "Both. Both." I told Nolan we could talk, but not over the phone, because by then I had learned something about men like him. They sounded strongest when they controlled the room, the agenda, the language, the paperwork, the distance. So I told him if he wanted to resolve anything, he could come to my porch on Saturday morning like a neighbor, not a president, not a gatekeeper, not a man hiding behind 3 pages of legal wording. He showed up at 9 with no lawyer, no board members, no sunglasses, which honestly made him look 10 years older. And for the first few minutes, we just sat there with coffee neither of us really drank, while the wind moved through the pasture and the faint sound of construction equipment drifted across from Westridge. It was strange, almost peaceful, considering this whole thing had started with his people crawling around on my roof like raccoons with authority issues. Nolan looked toward the subdivision entrance, where you could see orange cones lined up along the road, and finally said, "I made mistakes." I did not answer right away, because part of me had waited months to hear those words, and another part of me did not trust them yet. He rubbed his hands together, not nervous exactly, but worn down, like a man who had been carrying a version of himself that had become too heavy. "I thought I was protecting the neighborhood," he said. "Property values, consistency, the character of the place. People elected me to keep Westridge from turning into chaos." I looked at him and said, "Nolan, my farmhouse was here before your entrance sign was even poured." His mouth tightened, but he nodded. "I know that now." "No," I said, and I surprised myself with how sharp it came out. "You knew enough then. You just thought I would fold." That landed. He looked down at the first violation notice, the one I had kept in a folder on the table, red sticker photos clipped behind it like evidence in a very boring murder trial. "You are right," he said quietly. "We had gotten used to compliance." That was the first honest sentence of the morning. Not polished, not lawyer-approved, just plain ugly truth sitting between us. He told me I had not been the first. There had been other homeowners, even some outside the strict boundary line, who had wanted things the council did not like. Rain gardens instead of sod, nettle workshop roofs, wheelchair ramps that did not match the approved front elevation, a widow who wanted solar shingles after her electric bills doubled, and one young family that gave up on a backyard shade structure because the review process became too expensive and exhausting. Most people quit before the council ever had to prove it was right. They just got tired. And sitting there, listening to that, I realized the whole system had not been built on law. It had been built on fatigue. That bothered me more than the stickers ever had. Because a bully with a rule book is still a bully, he just wears nicer shoes. Nolan said the board wanted to withdraw the notices, cancel the fines, reimburse my delay costs, and issue a written confirmation that my solar system complied with county law. I told him that was a start. He looked relieved too early, so I kept going. "Public correction," I said. He blinked. "What? You accuse me publicly? You threatened me on official letterhead." People in Westridge heard I was violating rules I was never subject to, so the correction needs to be public too. He leaned back like I had asked him to walk barefoot across the county fair parking lot in July. "That will be humiliating." I smiled a little, not because I enjoyed it, though maybe a small and not very saintly part of me did, but because the word was so close to the point. "No, Nolan, it will be accurate. There is a difference." For a moment, I thought he would stand up and leave. Instead, he looked out over my field, over the roof his board had tried to control, over the panels sitting there quietly turning sunlight into power like they had no idea they had started a small civil war. Then he nodded. The agreement came the following week. The notices were withdrawn. Every fine disappeared. The board admitted my property was outside their enforcement authority, and they agreed to reimburse the contractor fees caused by the delay. But the part I cared about most was scheduled for the next county meeting, and by then the room was packed again, even more than before. People came for updates about repairs, insurance questions, possible claims against the developer, and probably because, in a town our size, a public apology is basically live theatre with fluorescent lighting. Hannah sat beside me and squeezed my hand once when Nolan walked to the podium. He looked pale. The paper shook just enough that I noticed. He cleared his throat, and the room went quiet. He said Westridge Manor Homeowners Council had incorrectly interpreted county renewable energy guidelines. He said my property was not subject to their architectural control. He said my solar installation had been properly permitted and fully compliant. He said all enforcement notices had been withdrawn. No dramatic speech, no excuse, no community character nonsense, just the truth. Stripped down and standing there in public where everyone could see it. For a second, nobody moved. Then someone clapped. Then another person did. Then half the room joined in. Not loud like a celebration, more like relief. Like people were applauding the rare and fragile sight of someone in authority admitting the obvious. Nolan did not look proud. He looked smaller, but maybe also freer, and I did not know what to do with that feeling. Afterward, people came up to me in the parking lot. Some thanked me. Some told me their own stories. Denied projects, strange fees, threatening letters, little battles they had swallowed because life was already too full. One man said, I read the county code for the first time last night, and I swear that was the best thing anybody said to me during the whole mess. Westridge kept getting repaired for months. Lawns were patched, panels replaced, utility lines corrected, and the final costs climbed higher than anyone wanted to admit. But the engineers said the neighborhood was safer when it was done. As for my solar panels, they are still up there. Sometimes I open the monitoring app and watch the numbers tick upward. And I think about Nolan, about Hannah at the kitchen table, about that woman in the parking lot who said she just wanted a safe house. I do not hate Nolan. I think he made a mistake a lot of people make when they get a little authority and a lot of applause. He confused what he preferred with what he had the right to demand. But I still ask myself, late at night sometimes, what would have happened if I had just taken the panels down? Life would have been easier, no question. The neighborhood might have stayed pretty, quiet, and unsafe. The council might have kept sending letters to people too tired to fight. Or maybe I pulled a thread that hurt innocent people before it helped them. I still do not have a clean answer. So I'm asking you, if you were in my shoes, would you have fought back, read the rules, challenged the council, and let the truth come out, no matter how messy it got? Or would you have chosen peace, taken the loss, and moved on with your life? Tell me where you draw that line. Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you have ever dealt with an HOA, a power-hungry board, a difficult neighbor, or any situation where standing up for yourself cost more than you expected. And if this story made you think twice about authority, fairness, or the quiet price of staying silent, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because around here we talk about the moments when ordinary people finally decide they're done being pushed around,